I think I actually came upon manners kind of late. Like my mom was a rules autist, but I'm a why autist.
Okay.
And then like, so I would be she has like she has a knowledge of what the rules are that is incredibly fine grained
Mm,
and that I'm like grateful for, even though a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. Like she'll say stuff like, don't wear brass jewelry, to
wow.
a formal party, don't wear suede or like patent leather heels, you've got to, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got a lot of that from her and it bothered me.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, wait a second, I've never liked making decisions, especially just like decisions ex nihilo. And it's nice to have a default that you can decide to do or not rather than everything like reflecting on you, if that makes sense. Like it's nice to have a rule that you can follow instead of just floundering around.
What bothered you about it at first?
Well, what bothered me about it was that like she couldn't explain like a why to like, a kid at least that was satisfying to me.
Hmm.
And I do think that like I could explain some of those whys a little better, but I'm also like the why is just so you don't have to decide everything completely like from scratch. The why is just to have a shelling point.
And so you kind of figured out a new why that is a satisfying why for you to like take on a bunch of other protocols and practices.
Yeah, not exactly everything that she does because
Yeah.
I think that she's like a little bit she's very like interested in rules and I think sometimes can be a little bit less like sensitive to the fact that like what you want to do is make people feel comfortable and make them feel like no manners are happening or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And so like, you know, when you're getting dressed for something you want to like it's more important to be like to be dressed in a way that doesn't make other people feel weird about what they're wearing than to like definitely not be wearing the brass jewelry. So it's better to do that, but at the same time, like my mom is very, very, very southern and she like I'm glad now that I feel like I'm like an adult and I'm not just doing stuff in response to her. I'm very glad to have like that fine grained like knowledge of what she thinks the rules are, even if, I'm like not always going to follow them.
The thing that's sticking out is like something that I really want to understand better, not just like about you or your own view on it, but like about people in general, is the extent to which uh, making other people comfortable is factors into one's own self-expression. I mean, like let's bring like the art and poetry into it, right? That like you're uh, an artist of various kinds, and I feel like a lot of the not just the stuff. I mean, all I've really read is your essays that you've posted, but I've read a lot of other stuff by other people that you've shared that you share for one reason or another, basically because you're interested in it, and so much of it is like about making clear or explicit sort of the things that are going on underneath the surface of these kinds of interactions. I mean, by which I mean like human interactions writ large, and the um, a lot of that writing has the function of being kind of uncomfortable to read. And that's not in a situation like you're not making people uncomfortable by exploring the literature of uncomfortable situations, but it seems like the discomfort is interesting to you. Is that true?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, this brings up a way that like manners on Twitter are different from manners in real life.
Uh
Like
huh.
in real life, it's like kind of awkward in a conversation to just like leave if you're having a bad time. Like I'm not saying anybody shouldn't do it, but just in practice, like compared to reading somebody's tweets or even like DMing them, it's much weirder to bring up stuff that makes people uncomfortable. And I feel like in real life I would like rarely talk about that kind of stuff except in like a pretty intimate, I guess, situation
Mm-hmm.
with people I'm already like familiar with and so forth. But on Twitter, I feel like I'm like, oh, I can do or say whatever, not whatever, but I can do or say or talk about uncomfortable stuff. And if people don't like it, like they don't even have to pretend they're paying attention to it. So because it's like easy to leave or ignore a conversation online, I feel like I can like talk to relative strangers about stuff that I like wouldn't necessarily want to talk to a stranger about in real life, like what makes people uncomfortable and like about manners, because in real life when you talk about manners it makes people like self-conscious about their manners, you know.
Yes.
It's been fun on Twitter to like be able to see how a bunch of people respond to things and read that discomfort and talk about it.
I'm so glad you went here with this, because this is actually the place, Twitter, meaning like the being online, talking to people online, is the place where manners has actually become most important in my life these days. I don't think that was always true, but I spend most of my time in kind of socially anarchical situations with children too young to even begin to care how their behaviors are perceived. So the contrast between that and being online, where people are coming from all different kinds of places and there's so little information about where people are coming from until that you're in an interaction with them, like that has actually made me hyper aware of a new kind of manners and protocol for interacting with people that I sort of practice. And maybe this is actually one of the things that I'm most actively interested in about your online presence, because you're very overt, I feel like, about what you're doing with people there, both sort of in a one to many sense where you're posting about like what you're posting about these days, or like you might say something like, I'm doing too much of this, I'm going to start doing more of that, etc. And I tend to do that kind of thing from time to time too, setting expectations for how like interacting with you is going to go. But you also have like really good boundaries about what you will and won't disclose, and sort of keep it constrained to almost this like discussion of those kinds of boundaries as the main thing that you're doing on there. And I really admire that, because I feel like I have to spend so much time kind of managing people's manners on there. And I want to hear a little bit about what that's like for you. Also, because I feel like there's like a super gendered component to how people treat people online, especially like replying to accounts with lots of followers. And I think I might get strange treatment relative to other people gendered similarly to me because of my sort of cartoon animal face, and also other stuff that I sort of share about my life that makes me sort of atypical in certain ways compared to like spirituality dude posters writ large. But you seem to be really super in command of like what kind of poster you are and what kind of treatment that gets. And I would love to just hear, like what, is there any downside to it for you? Is it worth it? Is it hard? Do you feel like you have to work really hard on imposing and enforcing manners in order to do it the way you want to?
So like obviously one thing that like I don't do is post pictures of myself.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that it's a bad thing for other people to do, but like some people can handle doing that and some people can't. Like some people have a really bad relationship with the pictures they post of themselves. Like they feel bad about how they look, they like the pictures more, like they feel some kind of way about how many likes they get.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know, like I've never been very online. I don't know like why that happens to people or who it happens to, and it makes me like I really don't like want to I don't want to feel the way it seems like some people feel. But I also I feel like there's something like uncanny about the idea of a lot of people potentially like seeing me who I can't see and like dealing with responses to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like not posting pictures gives people hopefully a more accurate idea of like what I'm doing and what I'm like willing to offer,
Mm-hmm.
and makes me feel less like I don't know. It's interesting to see how people react. It's interesting to see how many people talk to me like assuming I'm a man,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fun to see how people who think I'm a man like treat me differently.
Mm.
I don't know. Like it's kind of to be nice, and it's also kind of like to fuck with people and see what they guess about me with very little information.
So you enjoy fucking with people? Is that the case?
A little bit. I don't think that this is too mean of a way to do it.
No, totally.
And it's just interesting to know like, oh, this is how people would respond if you were a man and said this or that or
Uh-huh.
whatever.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how people default, right? And like, I mean, it's interesting that people, it's like I've had people replying to me assume that I was a woman before, which is fascinating. And I've actually sort of pursued that a little bit at times because like I feel like I'm making, like I'm making like dad jokes constantly. Like I don't understand how somebody could take it that way. But the thing that they always come back to, I mean, the thing that people always say, I mean, there's only been 3 or 4 of these, but like when I've asked someone, I mean, what the way I find out is they reply to something where I'm like making clear, like I'm saying, identifying as a man in the post, and they're like, "Oh my god, I thought you were a woman," and so I'll be like, "Why?" And they'll say something that comes down to writing style. That's what it always is, and like, of course, that's all the information that we have available, and like, I don't blame people for over interpreting a very limited amount of signal, and not everybody can pick up, the literary nuances of strings of texts that are posted like half paying attention. But I really find that fascinating as someone who's pretty into writing styles. And I'm wondering what you think it is that people are picking up on in your writing, because that's all you're giving people, to like make such an interesting mistake.
I think a lot of it is just like that people when they don't see a picture default to that.
Uh-huh.
So that has been my assumption. It's interesting like how much more like negatively um people respond to like me joking about like social stuff or whatever if they think I'm a man. Like how much they seem to assume that I'm going to be like using it to fuck with people versus like if I make it clear that I'm a woman, how much they assume it's like self-protective. I don't know.
I mean, I might describe a lot of what you do as criticism, right?
Yeah.
And is that do you think that contributes to it? Like I feel like a lot like Twitter is just like an ocean of critics, and that is maybe like a male coded behavior or something.
Yeah, and also like I don't know. I can't be sure. I think I'm criticizing women more. I mean, I'm criticizing women more because like I'm thinking about my own like behavior more than I'm and like my options as far as that goes
Sure.
than what other people are doing. But so like when people think I'm a man saying this stuff, it comes across like as very rude in a way that it doesn't if they know I'm a woman. So I think that's part of why like people respond worse if they think I'm a man.
Mm. I mean, that makes total sense. It's does so yeah, like it's just there's something here about a contrast between uh like a high visible signal environment where we were first talking about manners, down to like what materials it is polite to wear on your body to a certain function, versus this situation of like little to no visual information, other than like punctuation choices, which I know you're very meticulous about. I do you think that there's anything like fundamentally underlying human interaction that makes those two situations alike in some way, or is our manners like totally a function of like what sensory information is available? Does that make any sense at all as a question?
No, it totally does. I think that what's polite to do is very different depending on circumstances. Like I think online, there are ways that you like have to or should be careful that don't matter in real life, and vice versa. Like in real life, I like this is such a stupid example, but in real life, I wouldn't just start talking about like any random like thing I'm thinking about or interested in and just keep going on about it forever the way that I would on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's less about like the sensory information and more about like what choices people realistically have like for how they're going to interact with what you're doing, you know?
Mm. Oh, that's really good. And like you can't leave, like getting up and leaving dinner. I mean, you said this earlier, but like getting up and leaving dinner is a strong move. Whereas like online, you're not trapped, so you can like
You
it's
can be
okay.
risky in certain ways.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself like a risk taking person in general, or is being online a place to explore that you don't get to do elsewhere?
I'm not a huge risk taker in real life. I feel like and I do feel like online I'm like experimenting like well, number one, online I'm info dumping a lot, so I don't do it to people in real life. But yeah, I do feel like online I am experimenting with like how people take stuff and respond to stuff and whether I can bring it into real life without it being weird for people. There's a lot of stuff that I do not do online that I would do in real life. Like obviously in real life, I'm okay with people like knowing what I look like, you know, knowing my name. Like in general, just random people knowing my name. Yeah, like they know my name, they know what I look like, etc. But online I'm more okay with like saying things that would make people uncomfortable and like drawing attention to like aspects of human behavior that maybe people would prefer not to talk about or think about. Like people are very nice to me online and I have very little to complain about, but when people are mean to me, like something that has come up like a few times is that people have said that the way I talk about like human interaction is sociopathic. And so that hasn't happened a lot, but I would never like in real life want anybody to think I was sociopathic. But clearly I'm okay with people thinking it online because I keep talking in a way that makes people say that about me.